Inspiring single mom heals billionaire's injury. 200 luxury cars arrive to reveal a life-altering truth. Sarah's heart raced as she hurried through the diner, her mind preoccupied with trying to pay the bills, navigate her job as a physical therapist, and still muster enough energy to connect with Jake, her teenage son. Tonight, though, was different. She felt the weight of all her roles pressing down on her shoulders like 1,000 bricks. It was just another late shift, an extra way to bring in a little cash, when the scream of tires screeching outside pierced the calm. A cacophony of chaos erupted as people rushed to the scene. She felt a tug at her curiosity but snapped back to the task at hand, reminding herself of the importance of keeping her focus amid the pandemonium. As the ambulance pulled away, her heart sank to learn that one of the victims was none other than Matthew Carter, a name synonymous with ruthless business deals and cold public pronouncements. She swallowed hard, bit her lip, and internally recoiled at the irony of fate. This man, a billionaire with unflinching disregard for the lives around him, would be the one dependent on her healing expertise. Could she be the one to help him recover and maybe even teach him a lesson in humanity? Just when she doubted her capacity to manage her feelings, her phone rang. It was the hospital he was assigned to her as his rehabilitation therapist. Could she do it? Could she treat the man whose very essence represented everything she resented about wealth disparity? And suddenly, all her dreams of launching her wellness clinic, a space that represented hope to so many like her, felt miles away. How could she heal someone so disconnected from the struggles of ordinary life without losing herself in the process? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days rolled into one another, and rehabilitation sessions began. Matthew lacked the humility one would expect from someone in his position, yet beneath the bravado lay an unsettling vulnerability that only surfaced when he pushed back against the therapy. Each face-to-face interaction became a dance, awkward yet electrifying. Sarah faced an internal turmoil. Did she want to help him truly, or was she wrestling with resentment? Every push toward recovery felt like a step deeper into unfamiliar territory, blurring the lines between their lives, forcing her to question if she'd even want to save someone so seemingly morally bankrupt. And just when things started to shift, Matthew opened up about wanting to invest in local businesses, including her ambitions. Criticism from his elite circle erupted. A fleet of luxury cars arrived to celebrate him, reminding Sarah that wealth could cloak genuine intentions in a shroud of skepticism. She felt the tightening in her chest, the anxious thoughts swirling as she watched the distance widen between them. He might be tempted to retreat back into his privileged bubble. If he didn't, would society continue to brand him a pariah when he only wanted to help her dreams? The stakes escalated, turning her dreams into chaotic echoes of uncertainty. As conflict simmered beneath the surface, she felt torn. Could she step out from her fears of judgment and self-doubt large enough to embrace this opportunity? This path felt perilous, casting shadows over her resolve. As she stood at the precipice, she couldn't shake the feeling that both their worlds were about to collide, leaving no chance for retreat. Would they both find a way forward, or would the judgments of their disparate lives cast them back into despair? The first session after the tumultuous gathering of Matthew's elite friends brought an air of confrontation into the sterile therapy room. Sarah hesitated as she watched him move gingerly, the fear of vulnerability evident in his carefully calculated movements. Labeled as the ruthless billionaire, Matthew now stood before her, not in command but in need, yet the familiar resentment intertwined with caution blurred her professional instincts. "Let us begin with some basic movements today," Sarah suggested, striving to maintain a neutral tone. Nonetheless, her voice wavered under the weight of her conflicting emotions. Did she want this man to succeed? Was his potential transformation worth the risk of losing herself? Caught between relief at being of service and the residual anger at her circumstances, she focused intently on Matthew's posture, ready to assist him through his exercises. They bantered sparingly, the space echoing their verbal jabs, a mix of sarcasm and surprising candor. Each interaction was taut with unspoken truths. Beneath her facade of toughness, she battled self-doubt. Who was she to transform a man like him? Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen table, bills fanned out like a deck of cards, each with a different amount to threaten her already strained finances. Jake ambled in, scrolling through his phone. "Mom, do you ever think about starting that wellness clinic?" he asked, peeking at her cluttered workspace with an earnestness that tugged at her heartstrings. Still haunted by the fragility of her dreams, she paused, measuring her words like a tightrope walker. "I do, but it's tough. I can barely keep my head above water as it is, sweetheart," she confessed, weakly trying to pivot the conversation away. Jake pushed back, a fierce glint in his eyes. "But Mom, if Mr. Carter is willing to invest, this could be your chance. You're good at helping people, you always have been." The spiraling anxiety gnawed at her as she considered her son's words. The sight of Matthew's sinking spirit danced in her mind's eye. Could she forge a new outcome for both their lives? Could he truly want to redeem himself, or was she being naive, too easily caught up in the fantasy of altruism cloaked in greed? A familiar thought tugged at her relentlessly, the need to provide not just for Jake, but for a future she could sculpt from the ashes of her current struggles. As she went to bed that night, she voiced her silent decision into the darkness. She would seize this opportunity, but on her terms. She would force Matthew to confront the humanity he had so easily overlooked. Yet, in the cool morning light, doubts rushed back. She prepared for his rehabilitation like a soldier before battle, gearing up for the insecurities that would surely surface again. Would she really confront the intrigue lurking within, or retreat to the safety of her preconceived notions of who Matthew was? As their next session approached, she realized she stood at a crossroads. In a world painted in shades of black and white, could she delve into the gray? Would she be strong enough to negotiate the intersection of personal healing and professional advancement even if it meant risking her heart? The hour arrived, and Sarah braced herself. As she walked into the therapy room, the weight of unspoken challenges settled around them like a dense fog. She glanced at Matthew, who was resting quietly, his expression unreadable. Would he choose to rise above judgments, forging a new path toward redemption, or retreat back to the shadows where he once thrived? Their truths were about to be laid bare. The time had come to face not only each other's vulnerabilities but their deepest motives, catching them both off guard in ways neither anticipated. Matthew's gaze flicked toward Sarah as she entered, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them like a tightly wound string. Though he maintained his composed exterior, an intensity welled in his eyes that seemed to peer beyond her facade. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in her resolve. No more subtle exchanges or skirting around the edges. This was the moment for raw honesty. "Today, we're going to try something different," Sarah announced, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want you to focus not just on your movements but also on your thoughts. What you feel during each motion speaks volumes about where you are right now." Matthew raised an eyebrow, as if weighing her suggestion against some invisible scale. For a fleeting moment, vulnerability flashed across his features as he nodded silently. But then his mask slid back into place, and Sarah fought against the frustration gnawing at her composure. She led him through a series of stretches, each one designed to draw not only physical release but emotional expression. As they moved, she watched for signs, every facial twitch, every clenched muscle a map of his internal landscape. "Think about what those movements mean to you," she prodded, sensing the tension coiling more tightly within him. "How does it feel to let go? To embrace what?" He interrupted, an edge of irritation sparking in his tone. "Vulnerability? Weakness? What do you think this is going to accomplish?" Sarah felt the challenge vibrate in the air. Strength is not always in control. It's about facing your own shortcomings. Owning them, she replied, determined to hold her ground. You might find that fear can reveal more than you think it can. The space closed in around them, each second heavy with anticipation. She could see his mind racing, wheels turning in a rehearsal of defenses, but something flickered just beneath the surface of that bravado. Are you afraid? Sarah pressed, her voice deliberately gentle, yet firm. Of what happens if you allow yourself to feel? He paused, his breath hitching slightly. The facade cracked, just a little. She knew this was a pivotal moment. He could either choose to retreat or lean into the discomfort she was presenting. What if it means losing everything I've built? Matthew shot back. His voice trembled, laden with an anger that seemed incongruous with his typically polished demeanor. What if I'm just a fool playing a game that isn't meant for me? Then you build something new, Sarah responded, lowering herself to meet his gaze squarely. We all build, and sometimes we must break down before we can create something of substance. He remained silent as the air thickened between them. The fight within him flickered as their eyes locked. Her determination shone like a beacon amidst the haze of his uncertainty. It was the pivotal moment of clarity she had been searching for. He wasn't merely a billionaire in therapy, he was a man wrestling with the foundations of his identity. As they continued stretching, Sarah sensed a shift, the tightness in Matthew's shoulders easing just a fraction. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. After the session, she felt both exhilarated and drained. Could this breakthrough be the spark, or was it another false dawn? As she closed her notebook that evening, Jake's words echoed in her mind, seeds of ambition competing with her instinct to protect herself. She couldn't ignore the opportunity for both of them. Yet as she lay in her bed, she wrestled with deeper contradictions. Matthew was on a path that might help him heal, but what if he ultimately didn't choose to embrace vulnerability? The next session loomed. What were the risks if she exposed her own vulnerabilities to him? Would it deepen their connection, or shatter everything she'd begun to build, both personally and professionally? With that thought, closure hung in the air like smoke. An impending confrontation awaited them both. Would he dare to uncover the man hidden beneath the weight of his empire? Tomorrow, they would draw nearer to that truth, and she stood on the precipice, waiting to see if he would take the leap. As dawn broke, Sarah sensed the weight of the coming day echo through her morning routine. Each decision, from the clothes she chose to the breakfast she prepared, felt like a rehearsal for a pivotal encounter. Today wasn't just another session, it felt existential, and she could feel the stakes rise as she moved through her home. At the studio, the familiar scent of linseed oil and fresh paper lingered in the air, an aromatic reminder of creativity mingled with the weight of responsibility. She set everything up meticulously, trying to channel her anxiety into preparation. But deep beneath her rational surface, unease twisted like a vine in her stomach. What if today Matthew saw more than just a therapist? What if he saw her fears, her flaws, and her uncertainties? When Matthew arrived, a cool breeze swept through the door behind him, stirring the ambience, even as his demeanor fell back into its usual meticulous order. But there was a difference. The air felt charged, suggesting he held more questions than defenses today. Are you ready? Sarah asked, meeting his gaze deliberately, almost assessing what she would confront in him and in herself. To tell you the truth, I don't know, Matthew replied, his voice steadier than he felt. His admission hung in the air, unfamiliar but promising. You said something last time about feeling, about how fear can show us things we don't want to face. But what if I really don't want to? That's exactly why we're here, Sarah encouraged gently, feeling hope intertwine with her trepidation. Your feelings might be the key to breaking down walls you didn't even know existed. He stared at her, and for the first time, she sensed real curiosity mixed with a looming dread. She understood they were both at a threshold, each choice opening the door to transformation or retreat. As they began, Sarah guided him through the usual movements, grounding him in breath and motion while pushing him to confront the story he told himself regarding his vulnerability. What comes to mind when you stretch? she asked, attentive to his form, noting every slight shift of his muscles to gauge his internal states. I think about control, he admitted, his voice layered with tension. Every moment of looseness feels like relinquishing something I need to maintain. Like I'm falling apart. And what if that fall is a beginning? Sarah prodded, challenging him to view the familiar through a new lens, one that didn't insist on self-imposed rigidity. A silence enveloped them, a cocoon woven from their shared effort and fears. As he stretched higher, she noticed a flicker in his expression. Was it recognition? Or perhaps an echo of what she felt too? Do you ever wish things were different? He asked suddenly, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that demanded honesty. Yes, came her candid reply, almost surprised by her own forthrightness. Sometimes, I wish I had a clearer path. But I've also learned that the uncertainty makes the journey worthwhile. Matthew blinked at her, his face a complex canvas of emotions. Beneath the surface of his carefully curated reality, it seemed she was catching glimpses of an entirely new person, raw, unfiltered, and human. Then why are you here in this moment with me? He pressed, a hint of accusation lacing his tone but softened by an underlying curiosity. It's a risk, Sarah acknowledged, aligning her own vulnerability with his. I want to connect with people, not just muscle my way through challenges. I want more than just routine, I want growth. His facade fractured slightly, a breathlessness catching in his chest as he processed her words. She saw the internal conflict writ large on his features. This was the crux of the moment, the seam where clarity intertwined with discomfort. As they stood poised on the edge of revelation, Sarah pondered her next move. Today was about more than movement, it was about nurturing a deeper understanding of each other, exposing the self to initiate liberation. But with every choice comes risk. Would her honesty become a bridge or a barrier? If Matthew absorbed her openness, perhaps it would fortify his courage. Yet alternatively, it could dismantle the structure she had so painstakingly built. Let us push through this, Matthew said finally, determination igniting an unusual strength in his voice. I want to understand what happens on the other side of fear. With those words, the atmosphere thickened with tension, both thrilling and daunting. They were on the brink of exploration, unraveling paths neither had dared to walk before. As the session progressed, Sarah felt the pull of their dynamic shift irrevocably, like inextricably woven threads of a tapestry taking form. The question now loomed larger than before: what truths would they unearth in each other's vulnerabilities, and could they form bonds strong enough to withstand the resultant storm? With each movement, she sensed they were suspended, confronting what lay beneath their meticulously curated lives, ready to plunge into an abyss neither of them could predict. What awaited them as the depth of their vulnerabilities converged? The moment of truth was palpable, and as they pressed forward into the unknown, the question whispered: were they strong enough to embrace what lay ahead? As Matthew surrendered to the rhythm of his breath, Sarah felt the energy in the room transform. They were no longer just therapist and client, they had become explorers delving into the uncharted territories of their vulnerabilities. Each stretch he undertook seemed to rip a little more of his facade away, revealing glimpses of a pain that hadn't seen sunlight in years. Can you feel that? Sarah asked, guiding his movements while steering him gently through a provocative path of inquiry. She could sense his hesitation betrayed by the flicker of his eyes, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions brewing beneath his disciplined exterior. What do you mean? He replied, his muscles quivering as he held a challenging pose. The fear of being unworthy versus the longing to be free, she clarified, the weight of her own vulnerabilities ghosting her thoughts. What if this is not about losing control, but instead gaining access to a part of yourself that feels neglected? He faltered, the question stirring something deep within him. I've spent my life hiding behind aspirations, work, control, success. It's like a fortress that now feels more like a prison. Her heart quickened at his admission. He was indeed on the cusp of understanding. She could feel it. What if this fortress doesn't need to be torn down? What if it just needs to transform into something more welcoming, less isolating? Matthew's brow furrowed, his body tense as if caught in an internal battle. It all makes sense on some level, but there's a part of me that fights it. I like knowing what's next. And yet, knowing limits you, doesn't it? Sarah challenged gently. What if opening yourself up is where the real strength lies? There's so much I don't want to confront, he confessed, his voice almost a whisper. And it scares me. Her pulse raced, she sensed he was nearing the core of his pain. But it's in that fear that we often find our true path. As they moved into deeper stretches, Sarah felt her own barriers soften. The ambience shifted, as if the room breathed alongside them. With every inhale, she absorbed the tension, with every exhale, she released it. Today wasn't just about guiding him, it was a parallel journey towards her own growth. Maybe the fear is my teacher, Matthew murmured, starting to connect the dots floating between their exchanges. If I lean into it, I might just discover something powerful. Exactly, she replied, buoyed by his insight. Your willingness to face it could lead to profound liberation. They both felt an unsettling but invigorating clarity settle in the room. For the first time, meeting his gaze no longer just felt like examining his struggles, it was about grappling with their own flaws, aspirations, and the tenuous, beautiful journey of growth. Tell me, he paused, catching his breath between poses. What was your fortress? What did you have to break down to get to this place? The question rattled her, unveiling her defenses involuntarily. My fortress feels more like a mirror, sometimes a reflection of my self-doubt. I've feared judgment, both from others and, more importantly, from myself. I've learned to accept that growth comes with discomfort. His expression transformed, burdened yet awe-inspired, revealing layers of reflection that deepened their connection. Perhaps we're both afraid of being seen of what the world expects versus what we truly are, he suggested, eyebrows knitting with understanding. Precisely, she agreed fervently, allowing them to share the moment fully. In that shared vulnerability lay the potential for evolution. Each acknowledgement became a building block for a safer space where openness could flourish. But despite their rapid progression, an undercurrent of doubt lingered in Sarah's mind. Were they truly prepared for the aftermath of this shared awakening? The risk lay heavy in the air, but with every revelation, she couldn't help but feel the electricity spark. Let's take all this energy and shift it into movement, she proposed, grateful for his willingness to explore what lay beneath their facades. Let's not shy away from the raw edges we've uncovered. As they continued their session, weaving through a dance of motions and truths, Sarah realized they both stood on a precipice ready to leap into the unknown. Yet, in that moment of connection, she sensed the fragility of their newly entwined journeys. Both were at risk of unraveling in the chaos of honesty. And with that thought lingering, Sarah couldn't shake the question, how would this honest exploration transform them, and what would remain if the delicate threads binding them together began to fray? As the session progressed, the gravity of their shared revelations weighed heavily on Matthew. His muscles ached not just with physical exertion but with the emotional strain of disassembling the rigid structure of his reality. Each pose felt like a delicate unraveling of the shackles he had worn for far too long. Yet, as open as he was becoming, an ominous cloud of uncertainty still loomed within him. Why does this feel so terrifying? He finally murmured, as they transitioned into a restorative position. His breath wavered, heavy with the sort of existential fear that clung to his skin like humidity. Sarah paused, the question hanging in the air, a poignant reflection of her own worries. Maybe because it's unfamiliar, she replied, choosing her words with care. Facing the truth often means letting go of the identity we've wrapped ourselves in. It's the difference between existing and truly living. He exhaled slowly, soaking in every syllable as if it were a lifeline. But what if the truth doesn't set me free? What if it leads to more pain? Pain can be a teacher, she countered, an urgency spilling into her voice. Embracing it may show you more about yourself than you could ever imagine. It opens doors you didn't even know existed. Matthew mulled her words over, a flicker of resolve igniting behind his eyes. So facing the pain of my past might help me step into my future? Absolutely. Sarah's heart raced at his insight, yet a flicker of self-doubt snaked its way into her mind. She needed to maintain her composure for both their sakes, but the notion of guiding him through this frightening terrain began to unearth her vulnerabilities again. The question he posed echoed through her thoughts. What lay in the territories of her own past that remained dormant, waiting for a moment like this? With a sudden surge of determination, Matthew pushed himself into a seated position, his gaze piercing through the haze that surrounded them. Tell me more about your fortress, Sarah. What if breaking down those barriers leads to connection rather than chaos? His earnest exploration was a call to courage. She sensed the air thickening with a shared pact, each member committing to lay bare their struggles. It's a wall made of expectations, she admitted, barely able to manage the tremor in her voice. It felt safer to hide behind curated images of success rather than acknowledging my insecurities. But the more I cultivated that facade, the lonelier I became. Matthew nodded, his contemplation reflecting in his steady breathing. I recognize that echo in my own life. The rat race, the relentless pursuit of success. What happens when those gilded paths lead us toward isolation instead of fulfillment? With each word spoken, they were edging closer to confronting both their pasts. An unspoken agreement formed in that moment: each might need to confront fears or truths that could set either of them free. Wanting to build on the momentum, Sarah encouraged, let us channel this honesty into movement. Explore not just the physical, but the emotional resonance of who we are. As they delved into another series of movements, the room pulsed with a newfound energy. It was as if the air itself had become a canvas. They were artists painting a new future, strokes of vulnerability filled with strength, revealing soft raw edges in need of healing. But as these emotions enhanced their intimate connection, a flicker of doubt sparked again in Sarah's mind. Was it even ethical to navigate such depths together? At what cost could this exploration of vulnerabilities come if they blurred the lines that separated them? While they were peeling back layers of their lives, she couldn't shake the growing realization: what if their revelations bore too much weight for one session? A sudden wave of anxiety crashed over her, begging the question: were they ready to truly see each other beyond the shadows of their facades, and would they both emerge unscathed? As they finished with a shared moment of stillness, she felt the fragile threads of their journey fraying slightly, leaving them both unsure of the next step. What awaited them in the uncharted vulnerability ahead? The stillness was deceptive, a thin veil drawn over the complex emotions swirling beneath. Matthew sat cross-legged, the mat beneath him a haven of sorts, yet the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily upon his chest. Sarah's presence radiated warmth, but the unresolved tension lingered in the air, thick and unyielding. Should we share more? He ventured, his voice steadying with each word. It was a question heavy with implication, signaling a willingness to delve deeper despite the risks involved. Only if you feel ready, Sarah replied, her heart quickening. There was no turning back now. They had opened a floodgate, and retreating would only leave them stranded in the still waters of doubt and fear. It might be like peeling layers off an onion, he said, managing a faint smile, although his eyes betrayed apprehension. What remains after that might be raw and vulnerable. The analogy resonated with Sarah. Both were peeling back layers long obscured by the burdens of expectations. But would they find strength, or simply more tears? She swallowed hard. Let us dig a little deeper then. What else lies beneath your fortress? In that moment, his defiance flourished again, yet a flicker of fragility surfaced. I've always believed that success was the antidote to sadness, like acquiring wealth could fill the emptiness inside. His voice trembled as the words fell. But instead of feeling alive, I've often felt like I was in a constant state of pain, each achievement only a bandage over a deeper wound. Matthew's candid admission struck a chord, echoing her own hidden fears. In her own pursuit of acknowledgement and success, had she simply constructed her own prison, too? Suddenly, her thoughts circled back to her own path, riddled with choices overshadowed by self-doubt. Sarah placed one hand on her heart, grounding herself. "You're not alone in that belief. I chased prestige, accolades, and at some point, it all became about the facade the social media highlights rather than the messy reality." Her vulnerability felt both alien and liberating. It was the first step to mutual exposure, a bridge to traverse together instead of a path taken alone. The room held its breath, both aware of the significance. What if we both face the consequences of our choices? Matthew's words hung in the air, thickening the atmosphere with newfound seriousness. What if we confront our pasts to truly connect? Intrigued yet terrified, Sarah nodded slowly. Creating a bridge means acknowledging the foundations it's built upon. Let us sift through what's underneath all these facades and hurt. Together. Upon declaring that pact, her heart raced. This movement shifted something fundamental within her. The prospect of unearthing long-buried emotions became an urgent necessity rather than an option. It challenged her to embrace the possible fractures that could emerge, yet also the potential for growth. As they transitioned into a new series of movements, something extraordinary happened. Each pose began to feel less like a performance and more like a confession. They delved into a rhythm that resonated with their shared stories. Pain transformed into connection, vulnerability morphing into strength. But the air crackled with something unacknowledged. Shadows loomed over their sharing. Could this path truly lead to healing or further entrench them in isolation? Amidst the movement, her mind raced with implications. Would unraveling their pasts yield the desired strength? What truths would surface to complicate their intertwined journeys? With each breath that anchored them deeper into the process, the slips of trust between them seemed to hang precariously. Would they walk away more connected or fractured by the truths unearthed? As the session reached its crescendo, Matthew paused, his brows furrowing. Whatever lies ahead feels dangerously transformative. What if, Sarah echoed, confidence cresting alongside her rising doubts. What if confronting the truth is the very spark we need to ignite genuine connection? This question lingered heavily between them, pregnant with possibilities yet reminiscent of the possible tempest ahead. They finished the session, sweat-soaked and breathless. The shared moment of reflection offered solace but also foreboding. Amid the intimate revelations, they now faced the reality of healing scarred souls longing for connection. But just as hope began to blend with a sense of trepidation, Matthew leaned closer. "You're right, sharing is powerful. But at what point does it become too chaotic? What might we lose in the process?" As they exchanged troubled glances, uncertainty lurked just beyond reach, waiting to pounce. The looming question lingered in the air, capturing both their fears and aspirations in the fragile space they occupied together. What lay on the other side of their revelations, and were they truly prepared for the storm that approached? Matthew took a step back, allowing the heat of the moment to simmer, unsure of the emotional territory they had just traversed. Each revelation was like a freshly uncovered wound begging for attention, and he could feel the boundaries of his carefully constructed persona teetering on the edge. The tension had shifted. It was no longer just a simple exploration of thoughts and feelings. It had morphed into a shared vulnerability, teetering delicately towards potential heartbreak. "Maybe we should take a moment to breathe," he suggested, the words spilling forth instinctively. Deep down, he craved respite from the emotional storm surging between them. Silence fell, pregnant with unspoken fears and thoughts that clashed violently inside him. Across the room, Sarah mirrored his uncertainty. The aftermath of their dialogue left her grappling with her own ghosts, the shadows his words had cast darkening the bright facade she had clung to. In her pursuit of success, she had buried her self-worth beneath layers of achievement, each increasing title a desperate shield against feelings of inadequacy. Sitting in stillness, she hesitated before voicing her next thought. "Matthew, what if we discover something about ourselves we can't accept?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her honesty bore weight. Her words struck a nerve. Matthew squared his shoulders, suddenly sparked by a burgeoning resolve. Then we'll have to face it, we. These confrontations can't be avoided anymore. The conviction in his voice betrayed a deeper revelation that true strength lay not in the achievements he had once chased, but in the willingness to expose and confront his flaws. Right, she replied, a flicker of determination igniting within her too. And facing those flaws means we have to embrace the discomfort. But where do we even start? This query hung in the air, echoing their insecurities while urging them toward growth. I think acknowledging our fears could be a beginning, he mused, words coming more easily now. What fears have shaped your decisions, Sarah? She hesitated, grilling her mind for clarity. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, starkly aware of the vast waters below. I've always been terrified of failure, she admitted, the truth rolling off her tongue like a confession. It pushed me to chase the next milestone relentlessly, and now I'm left wondering if it was worth it. Matthew nodded, sensing the depth of her struggle resonating within himself. I feared disappointment both in myself and others. Each time I accomplished something, it felt fleeting, like I was desperately chasing a mirage, he shared, vulnerability stark on his face. The weight of their reflections seeped into the air, thickening it with emotional honesty. As they continued this dance of revelation and discovery, they could almost tangibly sense the potential for transformation sparking between them. Do you think acknowledging these fears somehow unravels the need for validation? Sarah posed, curiosity mingling with trepidation. I hope so, he replied, tone tinged with cautious optimism. Perhaps what we're seeking isn't the accolades but acceptance of who we truly are, flaws and all. If we can find that within ourselves, we might be able to find it in each other, as well. An electric current coursed through him, igniting a flicker of courage. Instead of quaking under the weight of next steps, he began envisioning profound change. They were embarking on a journey unlike any they had undertaken before, a journey toward authentic connection that transcended the superficial glimmers of success. But as they embraced this endeavor, the sharp question remained, were they prepared for the possibility of exposing deeper scars? Could vulnerability indeed lead them to the intimacy they longed for, or would it push them over the cliff into the abyss of despair? The resolve to explore this territory settled in his stomach with cold dread yet palpable excitement. What if confronting our fears actually frees us? Matthew ventured, his gaze steady. Then maybe we step into the unknown, Sarah responded, the line between trepidation and hope blurring together. As the weight of this new pact settled around them, the room felt charged with potential. Yet, lurking in the back of Matthew's mind was an unsettling question. Once stripped bare of their defenses, could they withstand the turbulence of truth? The idea gnawed at him, underscoring the inherent danger of their undertaking. As they resumed their movements, each pose held the unspoken promise of revealing more than just their physical selves. It beckoned them to peel away layers of pretense and discover who they could become beneath the rawness of shared reality. The dance between exploration and exposure quickened, leading them closer to an inevitable confrontation. The foundations they built would be tested, and in the heart of it all, the pressing question remained, were they really equipped to embrace all that lay ahead? The air was thick with anticipation as Matthew and Sarah prepared to enter this uncharted territory of self-discovery. After the wave of their emotional exchange had subsided, quiet introspection took its place. They were both aware that the revelations had stirred something deep within them, awakening not only fears but also a sense of opportunity that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Matthew focused on his breathing, drawing in the moment as if it were the last piece of a puzzle he was desperately trying to fit. His mind raced through reflections of his past, contemplating the decisions that had led him here. The successes he had accumulated felt like hollow trophies. What if all he had was built on the foundation of escaping his vulnerabilities rather than confronting them? Could we do something radical? Sarah's sudden question sliced through his thoughts, an electric spark of curiosity igniting within him. What if we made a list of our most significant fears and, instead of avoiding them, tackled them head-on together? The idea struck him with an invigorating clarity. It was one thing to acknowledge fears in the abstract, it was another to confront them directly. "You're right. Facing fears on paper might help clarify what we need to confront in reality," he replied, nodding, emboldened by her suggestion. They took a moment, each with a piece of paper and pen, writing furiously as thoughts swirled. Matthew noted his top three: fear of failure, fear of judgment, and fear of intimacy. The last one surprised him slightly, but the revelation felt crucial. Real intimacy required vulnerability, and vulnerability had always seemed a dangerous territory to him. "Okay, I'm ready," Sarah said, folding her paper with an anxious breath. The seriousness of their undertaking settled around them, and her eyes bore the weight of authenticity. He opened his paper, revealing his fears, worried he might be judged for what he had penned. But instead, he felt a rush of relief wash over him. The actual act of naming the fears already began to strip them of their power. "Let us discuss them one by one," she suggested, voice steady. "I'll go first." As she laid out her fears, Matthew listened intently. Each fear, every vulnerability she voiced felt like a piece of a puzzle completing the picture of her reality. She spoke about fear of judgment in her work and the anxiety it brought, how, despite her accomplishments, she was plagued by the thought that she would be unmasked, found unworthy. "It's exhausting trying to prove myself," she admitted, her voice quivering slightly. "I can relate to that," he replied, encouraged by the way sharing made his struggles feel less isolating. "I feel like I've been trapped in a cycle of proving that I'm good enough when deep down, I fear that I might not be." Their interplay of fears felt almost ceremonial. With each revelation, they dismantled the walls they had constructed around themselves, brick by brick. As her final fear of being truly seen echoed through the room, he knew he had to share the last one on his list. "Intimacy is hard for me," he admitted slowly. "I've built such strong barriers to shield myself, but now I see they're also preventing genuine connections." The words hung in the air, charged with a profound honesty. Sarah's eyes widened as if she had sensed the gravity of his admission. "Do you think if we start trusting each other, we can push through these fears?" The question loomed larger than life. Could they really dive deeper into trust, risking everything they had built? Building a connection based on shared fears rather than common achievements felt like embarking on a treacherous but essential journey. With every nerve within him both screaming to hide and urging him to leap, Matthew sensed a pivotal moment had arrived. "Yes," he whispered, emboldened by her faith. They felt that, together, perhaps they could navigate this labyrinth of emotions, confronting not only their fears but also the foundations of how they had defined success and connection. As they prepared to delve deeper into their vulnerabilities, Matthew's pulse quickened. This was the moment that could either cement their connection or fracture it irreparably, but an unsettling thought interrupted his focus. What if concurrently confronting their fears exposes truths that are too raw, too real? With every uncharted territory they approached, the weight of potential consequences loomed heavily above them. They were standing on the precipice of an emotional cliff, ready to leap, but the nagging question remained: once they took that leap, could they both survive the fall? In the days following their vulnerable exchange, a critical shift unfolded. Sarah and Matthew found themselves engaging in sessions that transcended physical therapy, morphing into a dialogue that unlocked deeper layers of understanding. Each encounter became a meticulous excavation of their fears, raw emotions surfacing with startling clarity. Sarah could see the increasingly vulnerable Matthew, and it sparked something inside her. She recognized that curiosity about his own fears mirrored her own struggles. "What did you feel when we confronted our fears last time?" she asked cautiously during one session. "The weight of being vulnerable feels both exhilarating and terrifying," he admitted, his brow furrowing as he reflected. "Admitting that I fear intimacy made me realize how isolated I've kept myself. But what if breaking that isolation actually brings me closer to connecting with others and with myself?" Her heart raced at his newfound insight. "Embracing these fears means trusting the process," she encouraged. "Sometimes vulnerability becomes a bridge instead of a barrier." The reciprocal dynamic strengthened with each passing session, walls once built from fear and judgment began to erode. Matthew's laughter, once reserved for corporate meetings, now filled the air as he allowed himself to be silly, flawed, and, most important, human. For Sarah, the growth felt equally transformative. She began to see her worth outside accolades and judgments. Conversations with Matthew inspired her to dream bigger. The vision of her wellness clinic crystallized in her mind, no longer a distant fantasy, but a tangible goal. "Imagine if we collaborated on this," Matthew suggested one day, his voice full of enthusiasm. "I want to invest in your wellness clinic. It aligns perfectly with the community outreach I've always wanted to implement." The proposal caught her off guard, yet she felt a thrill. "You'd invest in something like this?" She stammered, incredulity coloring her tone. "But I want to be part of something that matters," he interjected, his gaze steady. "I think it's time to turn my business skills towards something meaningful. Let us build this bridge together, Sarah." With that, the vision shifted from an abstract dream to a collaborative reality. Their sessions continued as both therapy and strategy meetings, merging the personal with the professional. Each therapy session became a brainstorming session, layering self-discovery while crafting actionable plans for the clinic. As weeks passed, the clinic idea thrived, and they embarked on scouting locations together. Their relationship matured from therapist and patient into partners pursuing passion, a shared mission that merged their aspirations and fears. Recognition came swiftly. Local business leaders began to take note of Matthew's association with the wellness clinic, the signs of genuine transformation evident in both him and Sarah. As they presented their proposal at community meetings, applause enveloped them, affirming their purpose. On the day of funding acquisition, Sarah stood in front of a gathering of supporters as they eagerly awaited the final tally of donations. "Thank you all for believing in this project," she began, her voice steady. "This clinic isn't just a place to heal, it's a space for empowerment, transformation, and connection." A wave of satisfaction surged through her. She'd accomplished something meaningful, a manifestation of her hopes, built not only on her dreams but also with Matthew's support and their shared vulnerabilities. Later, as she collected herself in her office, Jake burst in with familiar exuberance. "Mom, they did it. You guys are finally launching," he exclaimed, the excitement evident in his tone. With a smile breaking through her well-earned pride, she hugged him tight. "I couldn't have done it without your encouragement, and without Matthew." As they looked ahead, the clinic stood poised to open its doors, encapsulating the growth they had both achieved. The journey, punctuated with breakthroughs, setbacks, and revelations, had transformed not only their lives, but also their perceptions of success and connection. And in that moment, Sarah reveled in her solidified confidence, standing on the ground of personal achievement. No longer confined by her fears and doubts, she finally felt ready to take on the world. In the aftermath of it all, as Sarah and Matthew strolled through the now quiet community space, her heart swelled with gratitude. They had faced their fears, broken down walls, and emerged not only as partners but as allies in each other's growth. Navigating life's chaos felt liberating, and she recognized it was never just about achieving goals, it was about allowing authenticity and vulnerability to lead the way. In their ambitious partnership, they had both proven that transformation is indeed possible, illuminating a path defined by connection and courage. Now was the time for them to shine, to face whatever lay ahead with assurance, knowing they had reclaimed their power. If you resonate with Sarah and Matthew's transformative journey, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement makes a difference. Comment about your reactions and theories regarding their journey. And remember, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.